Hey there everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. And I wanted to share what I'm calling a double stenciling technique. This is a great technique if you have any type of basic shape stencil. Now I'm making a Christmas card today, but even if you're watching this after the holiday season, you could still use this technique and idea to create a really cool background. So for today's project, one of the products I'm going to be using is the Just Trees stencil from Simon Says Stamp and CZ Design. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it right on top of my A2 white card panel. I'm attaching it to my magnetic platform from Tonic Studios. I've pulled out some blending brushes and some positively saturated inks from Simon. The first color I'm going to start blending with is Cheeky, and I'm going to really make sure I get some of that ink off on my mat just so that way it smooths it out a little bit more on my brush, and it'll provide a smoother blend as I work onto my stencil. So I'm starting off first with a light round of blending. I don't want to go too heavy all at once. I do want to try to fade this out into the general look that I want without going too heavy all at one time. I did seafoam and then finally celery for the third color. So you can see we've got a transition going here down at a diagonal. Then I brought in the next color for each of those three inks, which would have been Surf, Blush, and Limelicious. And those I'm using sparingly. I'm only adding them really kind of mostly centered around the edges so that I have a little bit of a fade out in the middle and then some darker color around the edges. Then bringing in those same three light shades again, which would have been Celery, Seafoam, and Cheeky, I'm going to very lightly go over top of all the blending we just did to soften the white background. So it won't be as hard of a contrast. It'll make this background feel a lot softer and airy. So we've reapplied the stencil after I cleaned it off, and this time I'm shifting it over so that way it's not completely lined up with the trees we already applied. Then I'm going to pull in some glitter paste. This happens to be from Brutus Monroe. It's really pretty. It also smells really good too. It's got a nice fragrance to it. I don't know why I smelled it, but I did. Anyway, I'm going to apply this through the stencil over top of all those trees. And so what it's doing is it's overlapping the trees that are underneath, but it's creating this really cool background. It's creating a double stenciled effect. It's really, really pretty, and it gives a whole new look than if you had just simply either done the stenciling with the glitter or the ink. So check that out. It's really, really cool. So I'll set this aside and let it dry, and then meanwhile I'm going to work on some die cutting. So I pulled out some matte silver cardstock from Simon. I love this cardstock for die cutting sentiments. It also just die cuts like a dream. I also cut out the sentiment that I'm using, which is Merry and Bright, and I'm going to stack the silver die cut sentiment on top of two white die cuts. So I'll stack all those up with some liquid glue, and then this entire piece is going to get stuck up onto the shadow layer, and that's going to be cut from a piece of vellum. You can see that above the Merry and Bright greeting as I'm working on stacking them. For the glue, I'm using Simon Says Stamp Craft Tacky Glue. It's a nice, strong adhesive, and so I know it's going to hold down all these die cuts really well. Speaking of die cuts, on the left you can see I die cut a bunch of snowflakes that come with the Merry and Bright die cut sentiment. I die cut those from Simon Says Stamp Glitter, and I'm going to use those to embellish my card after we've added the sentiment. So my background panel is completely dry. I'm going to layer this up onto some of that matte silver cardstock, and I'm going to just leave a small border around it, just so that it frames it up nicely. I did want my sentiment to be popped up, but I don't want any adhesive to show through to the other side because we have this attached to vellum. So here's what I'm going to do. I die cut that Merry and Bright sentiment twice more from white cardstock so that it's stacked up and it's a little bit more dimensional. Then I'm going to glue that entire piece to the back side of my greeting, lining it up on the vellum with the sentiment that's on the front of the vellum. So now this will pop up off of my tree background beautifully, and yet at the same time I don't have any adhesive showing through to the other side, so it keeps the vellum beautiful and clean. So then for the snowflakes that I cut out, which are from pink, blue, and green cardstock colors from Simon, I'm just using some more of that craft tacky glue to pop those onto not just the sentiment, but also on the background and kind of layer them up, create a nice little array of snowflakes, and they paired up really nicely with the colors that I used for the inks. My last finishing touch was to, of course, add some jewels. I have these really pretty faceted gems that I glued down with some glossy accents to give my background just a little bit more extra sparkle. But because they're clear, they don't take away from the beauty of the card itself. It's just a nice accent. This is all put onto an A2 white card base. I did eventually trim down that tree background that we had been working on. I was planning on putting it onto an A2 card, but when I wanted to add the silver frame, that's what prompted me to then trim it down so it's slightly smaller than an A2 card. But you could have done it either way. Well, I love how this card turned out, and I also hope you guys enjoyed seeing it and got some ideas for doing some fun stenciling with your stencils to create a whole new look by just shifting it over and creating an overlap design. It's a really fun way and also very simple to be able to give your stencils a completely different feel, especially the ones that are a bit more basic. So I hope you inspired today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it so very much. I'll be back very soon with more to share with you all. But until I see you again, I hope everyone has a very wonderful day. Bye!